This is Dave Monk, your Prairie Monk, WEFT Champaign 90.1 on your FM dial. Kind of a snowy day out there. I'm on the board by myself, so I have to run across to the other side so we can take photographs. So you just have to hang on for a moment. I'll set the sound, what I think is good. And off we go. And we're back here. A lot to say and do today. First of all, I had to deal with a cell phone. Then I went to a city meeting. Then we went to, Dave and I went to Prairie State Conservation Coalition meeting. And then I went to a railroad museum meeting, and I did a landscape on the Sangamon Bridge Trail. And so I'd like to report on all those items. Cell phone. I couldn't charge my cell phone. But the problem turned out to be that I'd had it for 6 years. It's kind of getting out of date, but and you can't get upgrades if phones go out of date. But the problem was that I do a lot of outdoor work, and the cell phone had got lint and dirt in the contacts, so he couldn't charge. I didn't realize that at the time, but I was advised by Champaign Telephone to go up to the App Store, and the App Store is in the mall. I hadn't been there for a long time, very different, but they sorted me out, and I have an upgraded cell phone now, but they are able to take the phone apart and vacuum it out. So you might think about that if your cell phone's not charging, or it's not necessarily the chargers that the problem. It may be dirt in the system. But there's a few learning curves to go, but I have an iPhone which is parallel to what I did have. And it's a i5, which is not aluminum. The 6 is aluminum, but one of the problems with 6 is that it is the aluminum bends a little, so it gets be a bit more bulky. Okay, city meeting. I was rather pleased with the city meeting. It was a study session Tuesday night, and they dealt with 3 topics which I thought were well researched and presented, and it seemed like the community had been contacted in all cases. The first one dealt with the drainage ditch in the Glen Park area by Mattis Avenue. You're all familiar probably with the 2nd Street ditch, which is a detention pond, a huge detention pond, which drains from the Champaign Marine and really rectifies a lot of basement problems with flooding. A parallel detention pond will solve some problems in the Washington Street area, and that's been going on for quite some time. But the presentation was made, and the city unanimously decided to go ahead with that area. It's adjacent to a foundry, and so it is some industry involved. There's the little park is historic because when the industry went there, they sort of made a kind of town housing, and so there's history. It's near to Mattis Avenue. There needs to be some access for the foundry because they have quite a few semi-trailers coming in during the day, and they don't need to really go through the local streets. But that's the very a number of the local people were prepared to speak. One, especially a long-term involvee, and he was roundly congratulated for his royal opposition. But in the long run, most everyone spoke for option number one, which was to go ahead with the detention pond. So it'd probably take a year or two before it settles down, but it will help keep the water out of the basements in that area. It's not an uncommon problem when you have glaciation and the ridges and valleys aren't always freely drained. If you're further north in Wisconsin, you'd call them kettles and moraines, and Kettle would be a very good place for a lake, block drainage. Here, those block drainages in farmland especially are usually drained so that the soil can be used for agriculture. The next thing they dealt with was Green Street, and Green Street is been subject to modification, especially around Campustown. But this is the section that goes as far west as Neal Street, and it includes that underpass where trucks get caught every once in a while, because although the level is loudly stated, when you're right under the bridge, if you have a semi-trailer, your wheels are higher on either side. So the question is, what do we do with that? And I didn't say it, but I might add it, that if you make the approaches flatter, then the trucks won't have quite so much problem. But 3 lanes, 2 lanes and a suicide lane in the middle, which has been found to be the more appropriate, even though it's got that name. There's enough room on the sides to put sorry, I've got my cell phone on. The sides, there's enough space on the sides to put planters in and to put planters so that you don't have to put a fence up to stop people from jaywalking. So that was, I thought, interesting too, and it passed unanimously for the setup. The third one was about human relationships, and they want to do a study on the lower income people in Champaign-Urbana, and that was presented well, and it also received a unanimous blessing. It's amazing how different are the resources that some people have compared with others. So the graphs and charts were pretty convincing. Jason, who used to be managing WEFT, was the planner that was involved here, or at the city. I also had to think about the location of school. I have long since been a proponent of looking at more than just the school. When there was a planning event at the county level some 3 or 4, 5 years ago, I wanted to propose that Duncan Road on the west side of Parkland College be extended over for 57, and it would probably be a $2 million bridge at least. But to take Parkland College over to the rolling Champagne Moraine just west of Parkland College, where there's already a Jude Christian school and a Catholic school, and my feeling was that some of that area could be nicely utilized as an area for sporting, to have the agriculture that's now on Parkland College itself on already terraced agricultural land, to have a nature center like unto Anita Purvis Center in Urbana, which is 5 miles away, so you don't get a lot of the population from west side Champaign going to it. So on Staley Road, and it's the moraine drops off so that you can see the actual fall from the moraine, and the outwash plain where the water company takes out a whole bunch of our water from the aquifer that we're so concerned about when we go to Springfield or to Clinton and talk about leachates in the landfill. So that's all I wanted to say about that. Champaign is very differently organized than Urbana. Champaign tends to come to the city meeting with a lot of specialist people who have done a bang-up job to start with. Urbana does the same, but it gives more emphasis to the board talking about it, and it's kind of a different cat. Champaign happens to be near the railroad line, more commercial, has more money to support some of the things that they do rather nicely. So I was rather proud of that meeting. PSCC, that's the Prairie State Conservation Coalition, and David and I went. It was kind of snowy then. I had to sweep the snow, or shovel the snow before I went, and do other chores. But we went west on 74 and took the Downs cutoff, which allows you to go around the east side of Bloomington without going through it. And it was interesting that the traffic was coming down from the north and making a trail, but like the traffic was moving into Bloomington. And we were going north, and outside of the road there was no sign of traffic. So you could have an idea of the traffic movement by reading the snow. We got to, we went up 51 rather than through the back blocks. I'm a proponent of going by the back blocks because I love to see the landscape and read it and think about it. So we went by 51, which is very well cleared, and got to the meeting, which was at Starved Rock State Park. We went along by the Illinois River, and there's ice and blocked traffic way there, but a rather large body of water, mainly because it's a dam just down by Starved Rock State Park. And so there are something like 29 such dams that allow traffic from New Orleans to Chicago and into the Great Lakes. There's some concern about untoward creatures like carp following the ships through to the Great Lakes, and there's been a whole bunch of argument and research about what you do to keep the trash fish out of Lake Michigan and the several other lakes that connect some. But shipping does transmit creatures, and it's very hard to keep them out. Airlines do the same, trains do the same. So we're often faced with invasive species. The meetings usually start with, I'll run through the meeting because I think I rather like what they were doing. The site was interesting. The food was simple and not expensive, and the rooming was not expensive either. Usually what they do is introduce people and then have an annual general meeting, elect the new president for the year or several years if they want to be, and put that together. At the end of the meeting, they have a regular board meeting where they discuss all the things that the Prairie State Conservation Coalition wants to do. The mission is getting together. It has a mission, but this is about 10 years old, mainly put together early on by Fran Hardy and a bunch of other people who are really interested in having an Illinois trust or foundation that would bring together about 20 or 30 trusts. Some of us fairly loosely knit, some of us are Chicago area trusts that may have as many as 20 or 30 natural areas that need to be preserved and protected from invasion, protected from a road, highway going through, protected from losing a historic site. So this trust has been very interested in accreditation. That means that you, if you have to go before the state or before the IRS, because people are giving you real estate, but they want to take a tax break, so IRS gets into the action. So what are the rules of the game? How can we look at things like tax exemptions, where if you have a woodlot that you're preserving for the dignity of nature and you lose your tax base, then there's a tendency to cut the trees and sell them for wood, or be very disappointed that other people won't do a donation because there's no tax incentive. So looking at that sort of in theory is something that's part of the mission. Lobbying is also a part of the mission. But in there also is a whole bunch of camaraderie. We don't know everyone. If we meet once a year, we have a rough idea of who's who, but the fact that the meeting brings together a lot of people with similar interests. They might be very different interests, but they have parallels. You even meet local people from here. The Grand Prairie Friends was represented along with Heartland Pathways. And they were running on the first day of the event an informational workshop, which was more or less to tell you how to run your I think it was more how you can augment your how you operate your board. So some of the mission includes the making of maps. There's one young fellow who does really a bang-up job in a volunteer manner to give us maps of our own territory that are accurate, so that you can debate with people if you have to go before the law. There's discussion of tax details, and that training workshop had some of these elements. One that I come out with is be face-to-face, talk to each other, and be known. give people, politicians especially, an opportunity to see who you are, know you, and some of this is long-term stuff. You might be around for 30 years talking to people about your particular natural areas, but you might also be talking more broadly about national issues, invasive species, working with people and the like. They advise us to prepare a story. If you have board members, bring them in with caution. If you want a board member, don't push your friend or relative into action, but see that whoever is coming is willing to put some time and thought into the board. And then you have to, if you're the CEO, you have to give those board members the opportunity to be excited. If they're willing to spend time and money too, you might ask them actually to come and visit your sites, to meet with the children that are using those sites, to know the limits, to know the challenges. So knowing each other is part of the act, and knowing each other's stories. So face-to-face is important. Telling your story is important. If the new board member doesn't have a story, then you help that board member to develop a succinct story, and in time, that board member will gather up his or her own stories and not have to be dependent on your stories that you've given as a handout, but to develop their own interests and items. So you need to give all board members, including new ones, the opportunity to have constant contact with your natural area, to let them be there on a day where there's a celebration, celebrate their company, invite the local politician, invite people, make it obvious that you're around. David was watching it as well as I. He's been in charge of WEFT he was interim director for a number of years, and so he sees some of this as more general than just to the natural areas. So David may want to chime in.
I was actually just thinking that as you were talking, one of the most interesting things about being there is their emphasis is on conservation and hanging on to the natural resources, land that's out there. But almost every single thing that these people talked about applied very directly to WEFT. I think it's probably general of most not-for-profits. The board is out there and it needs to take a leading role in the longevity of the organization. The suggestion from person after person, presentation after presentation, is that boards ought to take the lead on fundraising. Sometimes you think, oh, well, is there somebody else at the station that could do it? Well, if there is somebody else there, maybe they should be on the board. That was kind of their point, is you want to find people who can help the board to do their job well. And something you pointed out was new people. Before people join the board, you should make sure that they know, here are the things that this board takes very seriously. And that means fundraising. That means you need to be prepared to come in and help us to raise some number of $1,000 this year.
Yes, and I was a little surprised because some boards don't have their board members raise funds. But I think the idea here was that the board members should be asked to raise funds, and first of all, they were expected to actually donate, perhaps a little bit, but they had to be fundraisers and speak to the people out there that don't even know that you exist. So let me run down the list of some of the things that I was noting down this morning. don't expect the CEO to do all this work. You need the board to be in there, and it's impossible if the CEO has to look after the drain that's not working or the bulldozers that need a driver or whatever. The CEO can't be expected to be everywhere and doing the fundraising too. Keep details simple is what I was getting a message for a lot. Make it succinct. Know your target audience. If you're dealing with people that come from a certain part of the community and they all have an ethnic background, then modify your work to that sort of thing. A lot of it involves mentoring, and so involve your board in mentoring so that they see the real excitement of someone coming to a program and seeing it work, to see the bird preserved, to see the grass growing. And there was also a drive to deal with it. Social networks. Social networks are tremendous, but most of the social networks are they're kind of friendly. They're family things. There's a sense of humor, and how do you impose a very serious topic of how do you preserve your natural area. So make sure that your visual material is interesting and that people will enjoy reading it. They do have measures of how people watch, and some of those graphs and charts will indicate, for instance, if you're watching YouTube and the first 2 minutes of your discussion gets listened to and then it falls off, then you have a problem. If you're trying to get information across, you have to have it early and assume that not everyone's going to listen for too long. Videotapes are often more effective than still photographs because they can pan and they can give you sound, and in that topic of conversation, I had the temerity to say something about microphones, because when you have a group of perhaps 100 people, you can almost hear each other. But if they're all facing front and you're in the back row, it pays to have roaming microphones. So I said something about that because we had a country gentleman who did Ken McConkey, and to have him handle a cell phone was tremendous. He as soon as somebody in the audience would say something, he'd turn around and it wouldn't mind that the microphone stand was facing his back of his head. So you need sometimes to teach your audience how to work with microphones. That includes how to pass a microphone. If you only have 2 microphones on the floor and you put them in the middle of the aisle, then people have to climb over each other to get to the microphone, so they don't do it, or they do it and they make a disturbance. It's better to have a roving microphones and to have slaves out there with them so that they can hand them along and teach people how to handle them along, and so that people can hear. If you have 1,000 people, it's hard to do, but it's really worthwhile doing, and you should know something about your microphone. If you're one of the people that wants to wander around and gesticulate with the microphone, then you have to teach them that if that's a directional microphone, you're off the air, folks. You need to eat that microphone. If you want to wander around, then you should bring your own microphone, which has a broad spectrum, and will pick you up when you... I noticed that the politician that was there, he put the phone under his arm and while he talked and gesticulated. So there are little things, lots of those little things that help us understand. We had a dinner which was quite pleasant, and I sat with people that I meet at the North American Prairie Conference and other places, and found out what they were doing for research and how they were mentoring with children. The guest speakers there was George Covington, who's a tax lawyer and who specializes in natural areas, and he's very loud and clear and easy to understand, but he also understands the difficulties of IRS trying to figure out whether this person has just bought a plot of land for next to nothing and then has an appraiser to appraise it up and then wants a write-off with a 501c3 that is huge. So the taxation people have questions about doing that, and they may visit you, and a little later we might even tell a story about tax audit because we came across one. That was followed by a very interesting talk by a guy named Jack McRae, and he was documenting the almost endangered species that have become not endangered anymore. They're floating into Illinois. They're the bears, the cougars, and what else was there? The bobcats. And these are big animals. They frighten the bejesus out of people, and there's a tendency for them to call up the police and get them shot. That happened recently to a bobcat, and this bobcat had been noticed by people in various different places, and eventually they caught up with it. But its demise raised a protection for these animals at the state level, which was absolutely unanimous across both parties. And you very seldom get that sort of vote. That these creatures are moving into the northwestern part of Illinois, above Route 80, and then down the rivers, the Mississippi River and the Illinois River, and into southern Illinois, and they can follow their DNA and know where they're coming from. They're not coming from the east, or they're coming from sites in the west where they're not regarded very highly, and there's a feeling that they should be exterminated because they're in competition with cattle raising and the like. And it's felt that many more wolves and other creatures are being shot and not reported. So we're losing that genetic pool. A lot of debate, and that's one of the sorts of things that might be a mission of this organization. It's about 10 years old, put together to bring these sorts of interests together. After that meeting, there was time for interaction, whether you go to the bar and talk or you sit around in the lounge and talk. Starved Rock provides that opportunity. Day two was making compelling visuals on mostly smartphones. And I think David ought to say something about that because he's interested and he knows that we've been trying to do this.
It was interesting as you deal with the telephone. The whole thing, again, the whole thing about the 2 days of this event was how much of what was happening was, I'll tell you what, with Dave on the other side, how about I move over, because I'm talking on camera. Give me 1 second.
I'm on the air.
Hello, here we are. So yes, one of the interesting things about the whole 2 days, I've taken your place for a moment, if you don't mind, is whatever these people were talking about, it applied as well to places, other not-for-profits, besides just these ones that were involved with conservation. So that means when these people are talking about using their cell phones to make videos and then taking the videos back and using a program called GarageBand in their case, to edit these videos together and add sounds as appropriate and things like that. Exactly what we're doing around here. This show every single week. Not only do you hear Dave speaking, but we have a video camera that I'm looking at right this very moment. And it may seem strange to make a video of a radio program, but because there's editing software available, we go back and we spend a couple of hours. It takes longer off the air than it does to do the show on the air. We go and we drop in visuals. For example, I know that Dave has at least one picture from this event that we were at for the last couple of days. So if you go online and watch on YouTube or go to UPTV on this Friday, and then on next Tuesday afternoon, you can actually see the video of this, and it will be enhanced with pictures that we have added. So that's one of these panels that they were talking about, is how you can enhance the experience of your organization by putting together videos. And the entire afternoon was much like that. It was here are ways that you can enhance your organization, adding videos and putting them online for people who can't make it to see the various things. The great thing you haven't actually talked about yet is there's someone who has created an app so that if you're walking through a park somewhere and someone has gone before you and marked where Google Maps or something else can spot, oh, you're at the exact same place this person had been at, then you can actually call up pictures that person has taken. If you're there at the wrong time of year for a certain kind of plant to be blooming, you can actually have it come up on your smartphone, and it will show you at the right time of year, you'll see these plants here. They can even drop in videos at that point. And at the very least, you can have audio of the person putting the walk together, the hike together, of them talking about, here's what you're seeing around you. If you look to your left, you'll see this. If you look over behind you, you'll see something else. So this is something that Dave and I are excited about getting together on. Dave has already done this. If you go north of here, there's a 30-plus mile drive that you could take where Dave has worked out what you see at various points around that. We don't now have to sit down and do this from scratch. We don't have to figure out the technology so that someone's phone can realize that they're at the right coordinates to learn something about the cemetery nearby, the stand of trees or whatever. Because somebody has taken the trouble to spend 5 years working on putting this together, we have the opportunity now to take the data points that Dave already has. He'll have to sit down and do the audio to add to all of that. And then when you're up north of here on your way to Rantoul, you could also be listening to Dave describing things around you. I think I'm going to stop now and go back and just be the engineer. Dave, you can have the comm.
Yeah. Dave was talking to Vern Lagasse, who's known me for some time, I think. He was with a group that came one day when I just finished doing a burn. I think, Dave, you talked to him.
When I asked if he had ever met you, he said, "Oh, my God." And he told me the story that this guy with a funny accent walked into this university club meeting, and he smelled as though he'd been standing in the middle of a forest fire. So, yes, that's his introduction to you.
So Vern has been working with the Prairie State Conservation Coalition. He's been on their board. He's also a contractor, and he started out with big television cameras that were standard fare a while ago, but they're still useful because some of the cell phone activities that you can use that are very handy to use are controlling. Like you can't set your own aperture, your own time, and take a very specialized picture of a flower. So some of the big cameras still can do that. And so he still uses those cameras. Let me look at my... I think you tell the story of the Vern being audited by the tax people. You have site visits by tax people who are not sure whether you're doing the right thing. So he was visited by a tax.
Yeah, well, I'll try to be brief about this. It's interesting. This woman came from the IRS, and she was clearly used to going to sites that were in towns. So her job was to go and spend 3 days looking at the properties that are owned by some organization to make sure that they are valued at what they're being reported as, and are still, whatever, they haven't been torn down. So he says, okay, well, so this woman showed up, and she was wearing high heels. She did not realize that she was actually going to have to go out onto prairies and other undeveloped areas. So they were out, and she had apparently never seen cornfields. That's hard to fathom. But we live in Champaign-Urbana, so it's hard to imagine not knowing what cornfields are. But she said, what happened over there? It was the wintertime or late fall, and the crops were all in, and so all this empty land that seemed to be unused. He had to explain to her that it's simply after the season, and this is what it looks like when all you have are the last stalks of it. And then there was a little bit of a fun mishap where they were thrown together in seats in the car because there were ruts in the road that they were on, and he had to walk off and go get a bulldozer to drag his car out of the ruts that they were in. So this was in a way, this is what conservation groups are all about. There are people who don't know what this stuff is that are out there. You should be taking these young people too from inner cities and getting them out to see what a farm looks like. How far do you have to go from Chicago to get to farmland? There must be some mini farms or something. And yeah, just what do squirrels look like? One of my favorite things about the entire time that I was up there, when we were up at Starved Rock, I went for a short walk while you were listening to the people on the board talking, and I actually found birds we don't actually have around here, at least this time of year. There were woodpeckers hanging upside down, poking around on trees, so harbinger of things coming back to this area. But yeah, can you imagine what it's like to have never experienced, even just seeing from a car as you go by on the interstate, what corn in the field and corn after the season, what that all looks like?
Yes, well, one of the people we were talking to was saying that sandpipers can handle that sort of non-plowed or low-plowed land. It's conservation easement in agriculture, and she's been watching this population of sandpipers be able to use that territory as a nesting area. So the ecology changes. She was saying that she gets a lot of help from Bill Handel at the recently changed Prairie State organization, which used to be the Natural History Survey. And so I went to Bill Handel's website, or Facebook site, and he had referred the Prairie Moon. Their seed providers. Prairie Moon was put together by Doug and Dot Wade, and had a son, Alan, and the gene pool that they sell their seed from is mostly local, Illinois, but they moved to Minnesota where they had a site that they could use gene pools from all over, and they refrigerate seed, prepare it. So we send them Ceanothus or New Jersey tea, and they process it and sell it to people within 50 or 100 miles of where it was picked. But they have a site which tells you a lot about the interesting plants that you may not see because you might not be there at the very moment when they're doing their thing. The boutelour with the pollen sacs sitting out. They're wind pollinated, so they have huge sacs of pollen, and it blows away. Just little sticks and stones and things that kids are interested in. So many thank yous from the people who are on Facebook to see that sort of information on Facebook available. But that came out of me talking to someone who referred me to Bill Handel, whom I know quite well, and is very helpful in places like Rantoul Prairie, Pope Prairie, and things like that. Okay, where are we? We're on the second day now, I think, and we really did have good discussions about graphics, and there was a very excellent conversation about student conservation organization. It's been around for a long time, and these are people who are sometimes grad students, sometimes just young children in high school. So they sort them out, they send them to places. If it's a big job, they might send 50 people there. And there's no accumulation. This is a natural area that's out in the boondocks. So they camp, and they have the experience of camping. They have the camaraderie. If you send 10 people to a site that doesn't have a lot of work to do, then you might want to spread this out about 3 or 4 sites in the same area. So you do one, and then you go on to the next and on to the next. And many of these people are repeaters. They come back, and they're the future conservationists. So I appreciated that presentation. At a national level, a local level, age-specific. You don't give high school kids chainsaws and you don't give adults chainsaws unless you've told them how to use them and given them chaps or whatever to protect them. But again, it's face-to-face and camaraderie. Then we had someone talking about multiple funding. If you don't get funding from one direction, you might get together. And there was some question at the Grand Prairie Friends later about they're in a fundraising event for areas north of or south of Charleston, and the question was, can you join up with another organization? And you do have to have some specific agreements because the 2 organizations might not be on the same wavelengths. So you have to have something that brings you together. Then we had Tom Cross, who is a legislative person, and that was excellent. He was saying, listen, guys, you need to get to know your legislators. They need to know you. They need to know what you want to do. They have to keep that in their heads. But don't go there in January when there's 1,000-odd bills coming to you at once. You can't read them all. You have a staff. The staff can help you a lot. But then by later in the season, it's going to sort out to which bills are going to be the heavies, whether it's about retirement pensions or homeless or child welfare or medical or building a new Panama Canal or whatever. They're priorities, and then you get to know about it. And then you get the staff to teach you what you need to know. And you need your participants out there in the boondocks to tell you what we want you to do, but also tell them what are the blockages, where are they going to strike some problems, and that is what's been happening with the Clinton PBC dump site. There's been a lot of this sort of politicking, and past managers, Steve Carter at Champaign, has been doing a lot of that sort of work, and he's been doing it the same with the airport. So if you have thoughts and you see a site, it might start out very low key. The Grand Prairie Friends had one guy was watching 2 sites that they've been working with, and there was a 3rd site came up for sale, and he called up and said, this would be a good site to add. They're all contiguous. And so Grand Prairie Friends is going to do that now. But they're looking for funds. But they have to tell you what it is. And it's a little far out of town here. And for me, it's often a little on the forest side. We put together the Grand Prairie Friends a long, long time ago. And the aim was to try and provide a body that is interested in prairie, because there wasn't any prairie organization. I hope it doesn't morph too much in the direction of forest, because forest is easier. You can hug a tree. You can't hug a prairie very easily, and we need that concentration. The name is still the Grand Prairie Friends. So the politician was giving good advice. There were some questions of him. Why is the Department of Natural Resources been losing money for the last 10 years? Well, it's simple. Natural areas aren't humans, and so
that's pretty much what he said. Was you can hug children, you can't hug, big blue stem, and so the money came from taking care of the big blue stem to make sure that there was money for the children instead.
So then he says, it's up to you guys to do this. If it's costing you money to take out invasive species, then you need to be coordinated. You need to know what you're doing at a national level, a state level, and a local level, and you need to press your charge, and you need to take your politician to those sites that are going to demonstrate this issue. So I'm just looking at my notes now. I think I covered that up fairly well. There was a wrap-up session where people who have done exceptionally good things were able to present. We didn't have a lot of time left, but there were several presenters, and for me, I was able to get together with the Parklands, which is in which is the Bloomington, McLean County area, and I learned, and I kind of realized, when they put a dual track through from Chicago to St. Louis, they took out one heck of a lot of native prairie, some of the only stuff, and very good stuff. So just being at that meeting and being able to contact people is very, very helpful. So Dave did a little looking around the park. You have a dam. Wherever you have a dam, you usually have food for eagles, and there's lots of eagles there. We came home by the back roads, which I usually like to do. It takes me a long while to come home from a meeting because I look around. Then on Friday night, there was the Grand Prairie Friends, and I've heard a lot about prairie chickens, but Bob Gillespie is in charge of prairie chickens in southern Illinois. It's around Newton and those places. And we've gotten so low, and prairie chickens, they're not really a chicken, they're a grouse. But at one stage when barley and rye and oats was good food for horses, then you had millions of these chickens. You could send a trainload of chickens to the restaurants in Chicago. Well, it got down to about 31 chickens, and not enough to do good breeding. And you also had the competition from pheasants who can lay eggs in the same nest as the prairie chickens' eggs, and the hatchlings hatch out earlier. So off goes the prairie chicken with the pheasant's batch of children, and bingo, you've lost your prairie chicken opportunity. So they harvest pheasants in those areas, and then they go off to Missouri, and they gather up chickens from booming grounds and bring them back by plane. They bring them back by plane because they have to get them quickly, because these are the males especially have been booming and going on for they're frustrated, and they can die in your hands if you're not very careful. So they have to have teams in Kansas and teams in Illinois to get those creatures out and into booming grounds quickly. Then we had a Champaign, on Saturday we had a Champaign, Havana and White Heath Railroad meeting. That's dealing with 4 miles between Seymour and White Heath and the construction of a trail. And we had to talk about putting a bridge over a drainage ditch. That we got done. Then I went out to the Sangamon Bridge Trail, and I was sort of amazed. They had plowed this trail is on Heartland Pathways right away. It's an easement that the city of Monticello has bought from us, and it's in perpetuity, and it's concreted. It's about 2 miles long. The first mile has been in action for quite some time, and very much appreciated. And the traffic that was on that in a cold day with lots of snow was interesting. So I've taken pictures of that, and if we're lucky, we could get them off the cell phone and show you what this is. One half of the trail is yet into chip limestone, and the other half is in concrete, and the concrete will be on the second half in time. So I think that's about where we are. It's time to quit. And thanks for listening, and we hope you too will come to the Prairie State Conservation Coalition, or go to the Grand Prairie Friends meeting, or to the Natural Area Study Group, or be involved, encourage your children to be involved, and do simple things that are helpful. So this has been Dave Monk, your Prairie Monk, WEFT Champaign, 90.1 on your FM dial, and I was glad that David came to that meeting in LaSalle, Peru, too.
Well, thank you for the invitation. It really, really was interesting. I have to admit, when I started out, I thought, well, this will just be a fun way to spend a day, see what Dave always has been getting up to. But I'll mention this to folks at home. First, saying anything you've heard spoken here, the views of those people themselves and nobody else, right? Just remember that. But yeah, my take-home message from the whole thing, not only was there interesting stuff that they were all talking about, but it all applied to something else that I'm interested in. All of the conservation-related things had something that you could say, oh, you know what? WEFT sort of can use some of this information, fundraising and getting out there. And what is your story? If you only had 1 minute, what's the real thing that you would want to convey to someone to let them know exactly why an organization means something to you? So all of us maybe could use that for ourselves, so that you're ready when you're someplace. You never know when you could be the ambassador for your organization, and you never know when you're the one who knows more than anyone else about the plants that are right near where you are. And you can say, that's big blue stem, and that's zoonosis and whatever, and various other things. You can always have all of those things. And I guess I did mention all the views expressed are those of the speakers, and it is time now for Shruti, Music of India, here on WEFT Champaign.